Here's something I'm totally behind on. So a long time ago, I don't even remember when, I solicited questions from you guys for a lightning round video. That was to celebrate 10 million views, and I wildly underestimated how many responses I get. So many responses that I did not one, but 2 lightning round videos, and I'm still nowhere near done. The first 2 videos answered questions from Twitter and Instagram, so this video is going to cover Facebook and Snapchat and Patreon, which I probably should have done first. Sorry, guys. I'm not going to lie to you, this is going to take a while. So grab a coffee, let's have some fun. Jerry Ruprecht asks, you recently have made a lot of videos on advances in rocketry. Why? And do you plan to continue this? There's just a lot going on in this space. And so there's a lot to talk about. And these videos have been performing pretty well. You guys seem to be enjoying them. So as long as you watch them, I'll keep making them. Bryon Mullen asks, if they made a movie of your life, who would you want to play you? And who would play your parents? Well, according to the comment that I get about once an hour, the person who plays me would clearly have to be Charlie Day. And as for my parents, I always thought that my mom, when she was younger, kind of looked like Elizabeth Perkins, and Jeremy Strong from Succession looks a bit like my dad did when he was young. So maybe this movie is like, I go back in time, Back to the Future style kind of thing. Please don't hit on me. Jason McKenna asked, are the 4 fundamental forces magical? Of course not. So what drives them? Do they expend energy to exert their forces, or is it just perpetual energy? With the exception of gravity, I think all the interactions between the particles are just interactions between the particles. I don't think it has anything to do with energy, but could be wrong. Mike Broyles says, explain gravity. Also, the moon is pulling away from Earth. At what year would the moon have been touching Earth, hypothetically, and when would it completely lose its gravitation to Earth? I did a video on gravity a while back. You can go check that out. As far as the moon, it was once a part of Earth, if you believe the Theia hypothesis, until it got smashed away at 4.5 billion years ago. And as far as how long it takes for it to get away from Earth's gravity, it would be something in the area of like many billions of years. Like, by that point, the sun will have swallowed us all anyway. Jason Snodgrass asked, my oldest daughter will be 18 in 15 years. What jobs that exist today won't exist when she enters the labor force? Followed up by, what jobs that don't exist today will be in high demand 15 years from now? Get that girl coding. I just don't think you can go wrong with having a good fundamental background of coding and computers and how all that stuff works. Even when robots are doing everything, there's always going to have to be the people that program the robots. And if blockchain evolves the way people seem to be thinking it is, I think a job that's going to exist will be a decentralized autonomous corporation manager. Mark Lott asked, what would the world look like if we could see radio waves instead of optical wavelengths? What would the world look like if we could see even smaller wavelengths? That, and how on earth did super geniuses a century ago discover how radio works? Real quick, Mark was a buddy of mine back in college. We were actually sort of neighbors in our dorm, and he's been super supportive of this channel since the day I launched it 4 whatever years ago. And I don't know if I've ever properly thanked him for that. So Mark, thank you. And we need to grab a drink. There are some cool visualizations online that show what it would look like if you could see microwaves coming out of towers and stuff like that. But radio waves are so big, they're far bigger than our pupils. So what I wonder is if you could actually see them, would you just see them as pulses? Because they're waves kind of hitting your eyeball instead of, going into it? I don't know, that's a good question. Walter Pedro asked, where do all the spent batteries of electric cars and hybrid cars go? Isn't the impact of dumping that stuff elsewhere, read poor countries, a lot more harmful in the long run? And where do those batteries come from on a global scale? Doesn't it hurt the environment a lot more to make these batteries than consumers are led to believe? So it's kind of funny, I actually just pretty much covered that in as much detail as possible on the video last week, but the short answer is no. There was a video that I saw from 2-Bit Da Vinci that was saying that the amount of lithium in our reserves right now, not even needs to be extracted, has already been extracted, is enough to build 500 million electric cars. Now, lithium obviously is not the only component of the lithium-ion batteries that are at play here, but cobalt is a rare earth element that they are slowly getting rid of. They went from having like 11 kilograms per battery pack down to 4.5, and it's getting even smaller. They want to phase it out completely, I think by 2023. Basically what it comes down to is for an electric car, all the extraction that has to take place takes place at the beginning, and then it's just done. For a gas car, you're constantly extracting the fuel throughout the life of that car. So it is way more polluting and way more environmentally harmful for a gas car than it is for an electric car. That's not to say that there aren't some resources that we are definitely going to be using more of, and that there are some supply chains that are going to need to mature a little bit, and there's innovations that are going to need to occur in the batteries to make that cheaper and easier and less environmentally impactful over time. People are working on that, and there's also recycling infrastructure that's starting to build up already around EVs so that all this stuff can kind of be put right back into the system and not be wasted. Jeff Harris asked, I would love an episode on the cosmological constant, part of Einstein's general relativity equation. A number that had it been off by the tiniest fraction, the known universe would not have formed, yet a number so small, 10 to the negative 122, that it is unlikely to have come about randomly. Yeah, I feel that way about the fundamental forces. Bryon Ramage asked, being that the universe is heading toward maximum entropy, I'm curious as to what happens when it eventually does hit it. Is everything down to the smallest possible particle going to be perfectly spread out throughout the universe and hit 0K? How is this not a violation of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle? Yeah, the heat death of the universe I don't think is actually going to get all the way down to 0K, but the particles are going to be spread out so much that they can't interact with each other. Nicholas Ubermensch asked, Hi Joe, what do you think is the future of food? Some kind of nanorobots that will deliver electrons directly into the cell? Or are we going to do photosynthesis or something else totally different? Love your channel. The future of food is Soylent Green, I think we all know that. Gareth Thompson asked, I think you're great. Oh. Your presentation style rocks and you're one of the few people I support on Patreon. Therefore, I'd be very interested in what one person you think has the best presentation style you've seen on YouTube. Hang on a second, let me get my head back down to normal size here. For me, it all comes down to two things. One is presentation style, and two is the ability to break down these topics so that they're understandable. Like, I don't like it when I watch a YouTube channel and it just looks like somebody's reading off of a teleprompter, which is way too many of them out there. Trace Dominguez from Seeker actually does a fantastic job of reading from a teleprompter but sounding like a human being. Actually, a lot of people from Seeker are really good about that. In terms of getting the info across in an understandable way, you know, Vsauce does a fantastic job of that. Kurzweil does a great job of that. Exerbia is one of my favorites that does a good job of that as well. And they're just really funny. Gerald Karimsky asked, is there any scientific proof that visions created by DMT are generated by the brain? How can such a simple molecule produce so much effect? Thank you. DMT and the effects that it creates are super fascinating to me, but I think the burden of proof would lie on proving that it's coming from outside the brain and not from inside the brain. Our brains are pretty crazy. I mean, if you think about some of the dreams that you have and how real they are, and they don't exist at all, your brain just created them out of whole cloth. I think it's possible that it could be inside the brain. Keith Sporman asked, what do you think about research where they're using stem cells to grow human brain organoids in mice, and the fact that they may at some point grow one in a larger animal and could achieve some self-awareness? This is a real thing. That's interesting. I haven't read much about those experiments or what their purposes there are, but I'm not too worried about these, you know, chimeras or whatever you want to call them becoming sentient in the way that we are, because they've shown that the kind of consciousness that we experience in our brains is not just about having more brains, it's about the different modules and the way they react with each other, you know, things that they learn doing split brain experiments and that kind of thing. So it's more than just growing human brains, it's about having the specific modules in the brain that we have. Ben Phillips asks, seriously, how did the most massive species of dinosaurs ever move? Seems like they would need to eat tons of food every day just to walk to the food source to eat it. There was a lot of food at the time. Christiane Young asked, hey Joe, I've got a political question for you. What are your thoughts on the Count Dankula controversy and the whole atmosphere of free speech in England right now? This question gives you an idea of how long ago I was taking questions from people. I did a video about this on my other channel, maybe I can put a link up here for you guys, but I mean, my personal opinion is I defend comedy, and I hate the way things are taken out of context these days, you know. In the Count Dankula situation, he was, you know, trying to annoy his girlfriend by teaching his dog Nazi stuff. And of course, the context there is that the reason it's annoying is because Nazis are terrible. He was in no way endorsing Nazism. He was using the fact that they were awful to, to have his dog do this stuff. It's not something I would do, but you know, the context gets taken out of it. And that's what bothers me. I'm seeing that a lot these days. It's just so much easier to just react to the controversial thing than to sort through and figure out what the context around it was, or what kind of person this is. You know, you have people who are good people who have always been on a certain side of things who maybe say something a little bit off color, and then suddenly they're charlatans, and the very people that they've been supporting all this time are now turned on them. And it's like, you know, let people make jokes. The world sucks without comedy. Just let people make jokes. Jan the Photograph asked, can you tell something about the increasing population of the Earth and when it is full? I look at this through the Guidestones of Georgia. The population problem is something I'm going to be talking about in an upcoming video, actually, but the Guidestones of Georgia thing is new. I wasn't really aware of that until I got this question and I had to go look for it. It made me think of the movie Resurrect Dead, The Mystery of the Toynbee Tiles. That's a documentary that talks about a guy who did similar things, put up these cryptic messages to try to change everybody's minds on things, and it's like that's just kind of an interesting way to try to get your idea out there. Just put it on giant stones in the middle of nowhere. Shay Deman asks, when will humanity wake the burp up to the fact that the Rothschilds control the global fake monetary system and it's not anti-Semitic to believe this? Probably about the same time people stop using my YouTube channel to promote their conspiracy theories. Stephanie Pruitt asked, how did we get so many black holes in the center of our galaxy? Did they form there, or did they all sink in from within the galaxy? The middle of the Milky Way is super dense, and a lot of matter in a densely populated spot is going to coalesce, and you're going to get a lot of black holes out of that. B. Alan Miller asked, with all the talk of mining asteroids becoming the next gold rush, what would it take to bring one back into orbit? There are several programs out there right now that are working on that. I think this is going to happen in the next 10 years. Dylan Lopez asked, if you were to go to Mars, would you want to be with the pioneers, the later colonists, or as a tourist later still? Or would you not go at all? A tourist. I think Mars is kind of like Disneyland. It'll be a lot of fun until it's not. Harrison Jacobson asked, you mentioned Rick and Morty in a previous video. What's your favorite scientifically accurate scene? Okay, here's why that's a horrible question for a lightning round video. I have seen every episode of Rick and Morty. It's not something that I obsess over, so I don't know each video or each episode by heart, so I can't just go through and tell you which one I think is the most scientifically accurate. In order to do that, I would basically have to rewatch every episode of Rick and Morty and go down some rabbit hole that I would never escape from. John Michael Cruz asked, how do atoms have unique characteristics just by their differences in the number of protons and neutrons, etc.? I think it's more about how these different elements with different numbers of protons and electrons interact with other elements of different numbers of protons and electrons. Duarte de Matos Viegas asked, what are your thoughts on the Searle effect reactor? Is it a viable thing or is it just a hoax? When they make one that works, I'll believe it. Daniel Coles asked, how long do you think you'll live considering you die of old age? And what are your thoughts of the increasing lifespan? Well, all of my grandparents lived into their 90s with the exception of one who was a chain smoker and, died of emphysema fairly young. Both my parents are still around, thankfully, and, I take pretty good care of myself, so I like to think that I will be around as long as they are. And I've been doing this whole intermittent fasting thing, which is supposed to help lengthen your lifespan. So I'm hoping I do pretty well, but you never know. Stephen Robson asked, the cosmic web looks like neurons firing in the brain. Do you think it could be alive? Are we all connected? When they first put out those pictures of the filaments and the cosmic web and how it kind of looked like neurons in the brain, that was probably the first time I really considered simulation theory, because whoever put this whole thing together, they're just jerking us around at this point. I think there would need to be a lot of new physics in order to make the conclusion that the universe is like a giant brain or a giant consciousness and we're all a part of it and we're all connected. So it's not proven yet by any stretch, but it's a good thought to have, and I wouldn't blame anybody for wanting to think that. Tim Robinson asked, what if a fish got turned into a fish cake and didn't know it and started swimming around in the box? Dude, what if a fish, turned into cake? I get like a fish turned into a fish cake and it's in the box, right? And then it starts swimming around in the box. Because it doesn't know it's cake. It thinks it's a fish. Dude. Tom A. Anderson asks, can you talk about laser-assisted chemical vapor deposition? It's a new form of 3D printing and can allow us to recycle old stuff to make new stuff. I don't know much about this, but what I looked up looked like it was a new way of cheaply making graphene and nanotubes, but I didn't see anything about recycling old stuff into new stuff. But hey, if they can make cheap graphene, I'm all for it. Dan Mason asked, do you think the recurring slope Lineae on Mars are more likely caused by dry sediment flows or by the flow of brines on the surface of the planet? So this was way back when NASA first announced that those markings on the surface of Mars could possibly be sort of like brine pools on the surface. I haven't heard anything else about that. People are talking more now about that underground lake that they found. But I seem to remember that another research team looked at it and determined that it wasn't the brine that they thought it was. So it's Still kind of up in the air as far as I know. Brian Wilson asks, can rational thought exist without language? Well, rational thought is a very broad term and not very well defined, but I think the gist of the question is, like, can an animal who doesn't have spoken language have the same kind of consciousness that we do? And my answer to that would be, I think that language could take many forms. You know, like when I see a tree, I associate that with the word tree, whereas my dog would associate that with a smell that he smells around, you know, because that's how they experience the world. That's their sensory input of the world. So to my dog, that smell is kind of like a language. So that's a very mushy question because, you know, what we consider rational thought might be a different thing for a different species or a different animal, different being, whatever. And a language can be all kinds of different things. Maxo Pap asked, how smart do you need to be to collapse a wave function? Clearly referencing the double slit experiment and the observer effect. I love questions that I have to explain so that everybody knows what they're talking about. And no, I don't think it actually works that way. Stuart Davies asked, if heat rises, why does it get colder the higher you go? Well, the reason heat rises is because the air above is lower density than the air below, so the heat is going to expand into the lower density. And the reason why it gets colder as you go up is because it's less dense. There's less air molecules, which makes things get colder. Dan Smooth asked, if the universe is expanding outwards ever since the Big Bang, what is it expanding into? It's a question my friends and I often ponder. You and your friends are not the first people to ponder this. It's been pondered since people first started pondering on the Ponderosa. If we have multiple universes, possibly one of those. If not, then the answer is nothing. And not nothing like we think of nothing. When we think of nothing, we're still relating it to something, so that nothing is still kind of something. This is actual nothingness, decontextualized, devoid of reference, just... I think that's a concept we can't even wrap our heads around. Anush Tangsali asked, if a super intelligent alien race asks you to be their pet, would you agree? Shoot, I'd probably do it for a human for the right price. Mokhtar Kordi asked, how come the universe is flat whereas the observable universe is spherical? I think when they say that the universe is flat, they actually mean it in sort of a mathematical sense, not in a spatial sense necessarily. Stuart Perry asked, why can't we replicate gravity without using centrifugal force? Because there's still a lot about gravity we need to figure out before we're able to manipulate it. Christian Barrios asked, hello from Chile, what are the boxes with the blue CB sign behind you about? Those are my initials. I swear I didn't plant this question, everybody. Yeah, I guess I haven't talked about it on the channel in a while, and the boxes aren't even back there anymore. But yeah, I have a side business. It's called Canker Boy, where I sell these vitamin supplements that help people who get regular canker sores on a monthly basis. It kind of helps to heal you from the inside out and keeps you from getting them. I used to talk about it on the channel every once in a while, and now that I've been doing sponsorships a lot lately, it's not really cool to to talk about my own stuff when I've got a sponsored video. So yeah, that's what it is. I'll put a link right here to a video about it if anybody's interested. Paul Sundquist asked, in what areas can amateur scientists make the most difference? Tell you what, instead of trying to answer that question, I'm just going to send you to a website. There's a site called zooniverse.org that is all about getting citizen scientists involved in helping out universities and researchers in various different fields. You can go there and you can find a project that looks interesting to you, something that you think you can contribute to, and yeah, you can be a part of something. It's pretty cool. Mike Sassy asked, how does the space station raise its orbit? Does it have thrusters? So yeah, a lot of people don't know this, but the ISS is kind of a little bit in the atmosphere. Its orbit is so low that it's kind of skimming the upper level of the atmosphere. It's very little gas up there, but it's just enough to slow down its orbit just a little bit. And when it loses momentum in the orbit, it does lower some. So it goes down like 2 kilometers every month, I think I read. They do periodic burns to raise it up, usually by some of the supply vehicles that come to the ISS, sometimes the European Space Agency's ATV vehicles, sometimes the Progress cargo vehicles from the Russian space station, from the Russian agency, so that's how they do it. There was once a proposed propulsion module for the ISS that would handle this, but it eventually got cut for some reason. Andrew Buckle asked, do you consider yourself to be an Anglophile? Good show, old chap. Not as much as some people, but I do think that Mitchell and Webb are comedic geniuses. Philip Mito asked, is it possible to entangle 3 atoms rather than the pair as usual? Yeah, in fact, entangling multiple atoms is one of the things we're going to have to do to make quantum computers a reality. And I think I read that the most recent one entangled like 18 of them or something like that. So yeah, totally. Svanberg R. Cornet Larusin asked, what's for dinner tonight? I think we got a rotisserie in the fridge. That's probably going to go down my gullet. Jack Strang asked, what's the subject of your next film and when can we expect it? I actually shot a short film for this channel about sex robots. Still working on it. Alexander Vera asked, can you do a video on flat earthers? LOL, that's my question. No, Keith Lockwood Millum Jones asked, what's your thought on Focus Fusion? Sounds like two cars from Ford had a baby. I didn't mention them in my previous Fusion videos, so I haven't really looked into what they're doing that much, but hey, I'm totally for the privatization of fusion research, and I wish them well. Emmanuel Cote-Bedard asked, do you think Russians will have an answer for the rise of the commercial space industry? They are in a tough spot right now, or they're about to be. You know, they've been kind of the king of the commercial space industry for a while, using very old technology. But I did read about a super heavy rocket that they're working on right now to maybe compete with your Blue Origin and your SpaceX and those kinds of things. We do want to keep in mind though, right now anyway, they are still the only manned space vehicle that we can get into space and go to the ISS with. China can get up into space too, but they've got their own space station. Mika Legrand asked, if you could ask an all-knowing entity one question, what would it be? Just how did all this happen? Kanan Ganor asked, your personal guess, how many BFRs will Elon send to Mars until 2028? Well, if they go first in 2022, that's like 4 windows between then and 2028. So I would say at least 4, maybe 5. But hell, I'd take 1 to be honest. Brian O'Neill asked, the thick white vapor observed before liftoff in a Falcon 9, is this some sort of condensation formed due to gases depressurizing and chilling the air? Yeah, pretty much. They supercool the fuel for higher density inside the rocket, and they have to kind of vent out into the air to prevent damage to the rocket. Andre Messia asked, do you believe Ray Kurzweil predictions, especially those about AI? I think he's pretty aggressive with his predictions. I think Moore's Law is slowing more than he first anticipated, so I would push his predictions back at least 10%. Yogan Hines asked, is your first birthday your second birthday? No, your first birthday is your first birthday because that's the day of the year that you were born. Your birth date is the date physically in, you know, that year that you were born. So birth date and birthdays are different things. Thought you tripped me up, you didn't. Jordan Wright asked, would you rather be all-powerful or all-knowing? Kind of the same thing, isn't it? Gabriel Edahara asked, does the heat death of the universe violate the second law of thermodynamics? The heat death actually arises from the second law of thermodynamics because all the particles are dispersed more evenly throughout the universe. They're just dispersed so far apart that they can't interact with each other. Chris Brand asked, how does space travel take into account the motion of the solar system around the Milky Way? Isn't the whole galaxy moving perpendicular to the plane of the solar system? Any more info in the galaxy movement compared to the solar system would be great. Well, it takes the sun 250,000 years to orbit the galaxy, so I think when we get to that point that we can actually travel outside of our solar system, we're talking about in time spans that's just not really going to be something that affects us when it comes to navigating. Virgil Matthews asked, do you believe that Zuma burned up as it fell into the Indian Ocean, or is it a stealth satellite that's still out there doing its thing? I think that it came down and that it's in the Indian Ocean right now, just because SpaceX has launched several secret satellites for the Air Force and other government agencies, and they never felt the need to make this kind of brouhaha about it, so I think it was an aberration. Yanat Cascaval asked, hey Joe, do you have time to watch TV shows or documentaries? If so, what would you recommend? No, I do not have time to watch TV anymore, which is why I am not even through the first season of The Expanse, which a million of you guys keep telling me to watch, and I am enjoying it, but it's just taking me forever. Jobin Babu asked, do you think that we can relate uncertainty in particles to as glitches within the concept of a simulated universe? First of all, that might be my favorite name I've ever read in my life. And I don't know about glitches. Maybe a fundamental part of the source code or something like that. Daryl Campbell asked, if or when true artificial intelligence becomes perfected, will the intelligence be granted rights like humans? So earlier this year, the government of Saudi Arabia granted citizenship to Sonia the robot, but I think that was really more of a publicity stunt and not so much an acknowledgement of her sentience as a being. I do think that they'll be given some kind of rights someday. How we get there and what kind of determinations we make at that point, I don't know, but it's interesting. Andrew Tundo asked, Joe, I've noticed that you bear Thor's hammer on your shelf. Are you into comics or anything else nerdy? Well, that was actually for a Patreon supporter whose name I thought sounded very Norwegian, so I got Thor's hammer. But I'm not any more into the Marvel stuff as any other film goer might be. I really didn't grow up with comics when I was a kid, just simply because the town that I lived in didn't have a comic store, so I just didn't really have access to them. Ben Campbell asked, it might sound strange, but why is the vacuum of space so cold if there's so much heat and radiation coming off our sun? Well, it's not that cold up in space. If you were facing the sun out in space, you would be about 120 degrees Celsius. And it would be freezing on the other side of you because you don't have any air molecules to keep you warm. Khan Sahid asks, will scientists ever find dark matter and dark energy? It's either that or come up with some new physics to explain it, but yeah, I think they will. Lord B. Xantus asks, greetings from Haiti. Is the price of antimatter due to its synthesis process or its potential use? How is it obtained? I think it's just really hard to make and it's hard to store. You have to keep it suspended in magnetic fields because if it touched whatever container you put it in, it would just... And they make antimatter in high energy collisions in CERN. When they smash these things together, antimatter particles fly out. They have a way of collecting it with something called an antiproton decelerator. I had to look for that one. And so they collect those and they can combine antiprotons with positrons, which are anti-electrons, and create antihydrogen. So that's what they do with it. Cran Middlecoat asks, "G'day, Joe. M drive versus Kansei drive. Is one have better possibilities than the other?" I haven't researched the Kansei drive very much, but recent studies have kind of put the squash on the whole M drive thing, unfortunately. So if I had to pick one of them, I guess it would be the Kansei drive, because yeah, default. Hector Kananzi asked, are you concerned with or supportive of the trend towards privatization in the West? Well, you can't really answer that without getting a little political. Mostly I'm fine with privatization of things, but there are certain things like healthcare and criminal justice and basically things that are in the public good that I don't think should have a profit motive behind it, but that's just me. Christian Mihawk asked, do photons have mass and do shadows have mass? Photons don't have mass, but they do have momentum. Shadows don't have mass because all a shadow is a lack of photons. Giles Mahoney asked, as the Earth orbits the Sun, how are the same approximate periods of day and night during the 24-hour maintained throughout the year at any point in the surface? The wording you choose here perplexes me. My immediate answer is that the day and night cycles on Earth have nothing to do with our orbit around the Sun. It has to do with our rotation, but the seasonal changes that causes our days and nights to shift in length, that has to do with the fact that the Earth is tilted 23 degrees. From Snapchat, Itch asked, do you think Mark Zuckerberg is a lizard person or a robot? A robot. Flynn asked, do you think Stephen Hawking's disability was the main reason he became such an icon? And is that a good thing for him or science? Yeah, he was totally cheating by having ALS. Mr. Dynamic asked, what do you think of the Kugelblitz? Sounds like a good snack bar. Floyd Johnson asked, what's your opinion of spinning black holes and possible future civilizations orbiting them? One of the solutions to the Fermi paradox that I find interesting is the idea that there are alien civilizations around gravity wells like that distorts their perception of time relative to ours. So, a message that they put out that might only last, a minute on their time might be stretched out thousands of years where we are. So we might be hearing all kinds of signals, it's just that it doesn't sound like a signal to us because it's been stretched and distorted so much. Peshkin asked, light can act as a particle or as a photon, but how does it decide what to be at a given moment? Does it live in a probability state like other particles? Yeah, I missed the version of the double slit experiment where light turned into furniture. And I know what you meant photon, and yeah, it exists in a probability state until it's measured. Bear asked, 69 Mustang Mach 1 or Tesla Roadster 2? For technology, the Roadster. For a great ride, your mama. Keaton Pressler asked, hey Joe, why do galaxies take on different forms? Because they're actually Pokemon. Jens asked, what's your favorite superhero? The Toxic Avenger. Blake Brandstool asks, what's your favorite college in the country? I'm repping that Boomer Sooner. Here's a little life tip. How can you tell if somebody graduated from OU? Just wait, they'll tell you. Bunny Jones asked, hi Joe, I want to know why the Aboriginal people of Australia seem to be a shrinking population. Shrinking like getting shorter or? Oh. They're actually getting shorter. I didn't know that was a thing. Apparently they've gotten shorter since prehistoric days, so it's probably a change in diet. That's what this says. Andre asked, if we ever accidentally created a black hole on Earth, what would we experience as a result and for how long? Technically, they make tiny atom-sized black holes at CERN all the time that dissolve immediately. But an actual stellar mass black hole, first of all, would probably be impossible, and second of all, we would just be spaghettified immediately. Eldolor Amaranth asked, what do you think habitats on gas giants might look like? Well, since there's no land to slow down the air speeds, the winds on these gas giants can go really fast. Like on Neptune, it can actually go over 1,000 miles an hour. So I think habitats on gas giants would look like destroyed habitats. Zach Mislevy asked, where do you think the Boring Company is going, and do you think they'll actually drill? Or is this just a way for Elon to sell stuff and make money? Well, he's certainly having fun making money and selling stuff. How much money he's making, I don't know. But I think since since you asked this question, there's actually been a lot that's happened. I know they've made some kind of deal to do something in Chicago. There was something in DC, from like DC to Philadelphia or something like that. And there are some going on in LA. So they are actually doing some stuff, yeah. EMI asks, what thing scared you the most as a kid? I actually had a ton of really weird phobias and fears and stuff, anxieties when I was a kid. For a while, I actually, this is embarrassing. I actually thought I was a werewolf for a while when I was a kid. I actually like worried myself so much that I got sick and had to stay home from school one day about that. And I was terrified of the Jerry Lewis telethons because the MDA telethons, because muscular dystrophy was like this thing that anybody could catch. It could strike you at any time. There was no cure for it. And it was just all this footage of these crippled kids, you know, unable to get around. It just scared the crap out of me. I just knew it was something I was going to catch one day. And I remember I was convinced at one point that if I slept on one half of my bed that I would catch the muscular dystrophy stuff. I would catch the telethon disease somehow if I slept on that one half of the bed. Does it make sense? No, and I grew out of it, you know, a few years ago. From Patreon, AltPod asked, where do you see humanity in 100 years or 1,000 years? You know, in 100 years, I think we'll still be in this sort of transition phase that we're in to get to the next stage of human existence. In 1,000 years, I think that phase will have come and gone many times over, and we'll be living underground, feeding on moles. Optimism. Roman Lukashov asked, why when I look up at this blue summer sky, I see little light circles moving around? I don't know how to explain. My wife thinks I'm tripping, LOL. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. You got floaters, my friend. I get them too. I've gotten them my whole life. They drive me absolutely crazy. I have blue eyes, and my eyes are super sensitive to light anyway, but I also get these, actually, yeah, I can see some right now. Wow. They're basically proteins that are floating around in the viscous fluid in your eye. Lieber Mac asked, do we have free will, or does the universe conspire to make us think we have free will? I think our consciousness conspires to make us think we have free will when we actually have like semi-conscious modules in our brain that make all the decisions for us, and then this interpreter module of our brain that like justifies the decisions that get made in the background behind the curtain. Our brains are screwed up. Brian Purcell asked, hey Joe, lightning round question. What's the deal with those skull plaques behind your head, baby buffaloes? Well, they're not up there anymore since this question was asked, but yeah, these are awards that I got for my movie way back in when, at a place called the Bare Bones International Film Festival in Oklahoma. It's just kind of like hangs on there, but yeah, it's like a little ceramic buffalo head. I used to have it up there, but then I took it down. Frank Celestino asked, hey Joe, how's your progress with P90X? Will you be showing us some before and after pics? I hope you hit your goal physique, especially now that you're famous. Yeah, I'm still not famous, but I actually got away from the P90X thing a little bit. Now I'm doing this sort of intermittent fasting-based, science-based six-pack thing. I'm not expecting that I'll get a six-pack or anything, but I'm giving it a whirl. So far, I like it. Steve Reberg asked, I like the way SpaceX and Blue Origin CEOs have software background. Do you think the fast pace of both companies is the flat structure for brainstorming and try it all, fail, backtrack, try again is the reason for both of them getting so fast progression? That hurt me reading that. Well, not to nitpick, but Blue Origin's actually been moving really slowly and on purpose for way longer than SpaceX has even been around, so I'm not sure if this applies to them. But yeah, a big part of SpaceX's success is their Silicon Valley mindset of, you know, fail early and fail often. Saul Pomfret asked, now that you've broken free of the world of advertising career-wise, what's your honest opinion of the industry? You know, advertising has changed a lot since I first got into it. You know, I studied it in college back in the very late 90s and got into it in the early 2000s. And back then you could still do, you know, campaigns and be creative and that kind of thing. But today it's all data sets and behavioral targeting and just kind of like pounding a message into people's heads over and over again on social media. You know, it's not about writing the fun, clever ad anymore, which frankly I was really good at that. But you know, now it's all data-driven and analytical and multimedia strategies and stuff like that, and that's just, I don't know, it's kind of boring to me. Trauma Llama asked, could entangled quantum particles be the medium for serendipity, synchronicity, and other etheric chords that bind people together even across long distances? I mean, we're a long way from proving something like that, but you know, if OR is a thing, sure, maybe. Steve Victory asked, do you think we will have complete computer-brain interface in our lifetime? Not speaking of the basic interface like we see with epilepsy to limit seizures, but more along the lines of being able to smush instant knowledge into a person's thought process from the internet. In our lifetimes, I'm going to be negative and say probably not, which sucks. There's just so much that we still don't understand about the brain and how it works that to be able to actually interface with it through a computer, there would have to be a lot of advancement that occurs in that field, a lot of maturity that has yet to happen, and it would have to happen really fast to get there in our lifetimes, I think. All right. We made it. We finally got through all the questions from the last lightning round video, which was done to celebrate 10 million views on this channel. And I got it done just in time to announce that we just hit 20 million. So it's time for another lightning round video. But I learned my lesson last time, so with this one we're doing, as they say, something completely different. This one I'm going to keep to only 20 questions, but I'm gonna let you pick the 20 questions. Ask your question for the next lightning round video in the comments of this video down below, and then go through and like all of your favorite questions that other people ask, and the ones that get the most likes, the top 20, I will do in the lightning round video. Let's try it that way. To everybody who asked a question in the last lightning round video, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your questions, and I'm sorry it took me so long to get to them. To everybody asking questions down below, good luck to you, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. By the way, if you like the shirt and you want to represent, we have these available in the shirt store at answerswithjoe.com/shirts. It is also available on mugs. It is also available on posters. It is also available on stickers. It's all over the place, as well as the regular cool, fun, nerdy shirts that we have out there. Go check them out. It really helps support the channel, and it helps support a great designer out in Prague named Michael, who is just an amazing person. So it helps all around. So answerswithjoe.com/shirts. See you there. All right, next week I'm getting back to regular programming and talking about some cool stuff. So stick around. Until then, you guys have an eye-opening week, and I'll see you next Monday. Love you guys. Take care.